No one expected that reaction. Not from her, not on that topic, and certainly not in that setting. When Stephen Colbert brought up the now widely discussed Talarico interview during his exchange with Jasmine Crockett, it initially felt like a routine late-night setup, a pointed reference, a hint of tension, and the promise of a viral moment waiting to ignite. The audience anticipated sparks. Social media, always hungry for conflict, seemed ready to explode before she even spoke. In an era where political discourse often thrives on outrage, viewers expected either a sharp clapback or a visible flash of irritation, something clipped, replayed, and dissected within minutes. But instead of delivering the fireworks so many assumed were coming, Crockett paused. It wasn't a hesitant pause or a defensive one. It was deliberate, the kind of silence that commands attention rather than loses it. In that brief stillness, the energy in the room suddenly shifted. When she finally responded, her tone was calm, steady, and intentional, not combative, not dismissive, not rehearsed in the theatrical sense, but precise. She didn't sidestep the framing of the Talarico exchange, nor did she pretend the controversy didn't exist. She leaned into it, not emotionally, but analytically, dissecting the premise rather than attacking the messenger. And that intellectual pivot is what caught so many people off guard. In today's political climate, reaction is currency. The loudest voice often dominates the algorithm. The sharpest insult earns the replay. Yet Crockett chose a different strategy. She slowed the moment down. Instead of validating the tension implied in the question, she examined it. She gently questioned the assumptions embedded in the framing. She redirected the conversation away from spectacle and toward context. Almost imperceptibly, the focus stopped being about whether she had contradicted herself and started being about whether the original interview had been fully understood. That's when the online mood began to shift. The trending narrative moved from outrage to control. There's a fundamental difference between reacting and responding. Reaction is instinctive and emotional. Response is measured and intentional. Many politicians react. Few truly respond. Crockett responded, and in doing so, she forced both the host and the audience to recalibrate. She emphasized that context matters, that sound bites rarely capture the complexity of policy discussions, and that interviews, especially high-stakes political ones, can be selectively clipped in ways that distort their full meaning. Without raising her voice or escalating the tension, she made it clear she would not allow someone else to define her position for her, not even on a nationally televised platform known for sharp humor and pointed commentary. What made the exchange compelling wasn't confrontation, it was clarity. Colbert appeared momentarily surprised, not adversarial, just recalibrating. The energy in the studio transitioned from playful late-night banter to something more reflective and substantive. Viewers who expected escalation instead witnessed explanation. Crockett calmly laid out the sequence of events surrounding the Talarico interview, what was asked, how it was answered, how certain remarks were clipped, and how those fragments were amplified. She avoided accusing the media of bad faith. She didn't lean into victimhood. She simply mapped out the timeline, piece by piece, as if she had anticipated that the moment would arrive and prepared not with anger, but with facts. Preparation communicates confidence, and confidence delivered without aggression is rare in modern politics. As she continued, it became evident that her goal wasn't self-defense, it was preservation of context. That distinction is subtle but powerful. In the Talarico interview, specific lines had circulated widely online, sharp, emotionally charged snippets that thrive in digital ecosystems. But as Crockett pointed out, a clip is not a conversation and a headline is not an argument. That reminder reframed the controversy. Even critics seemed to pause, because instead of feeding the cycle of outrage, she deprived it of oxygen. She redirected attention back to substance. And in doing so, she transformed the question from, did she slip up, to, did we oversimplify? That shift matters. It demonstrates how tone can alter trajectory. It shows that composure can be more disruptive than confrontation. Perhaps most unexpected was her acknowledgement that disagreement is not inherently negative. She noted that challenging interviews are part of a healthy democracy, that difficult questions are necessary, and that public officials should expect scrutiny. That openness diffused what could have been a combative exchange and replaced it with a constructive one. Rather than presenting herself as misunderstood or wronged, she framed the moment as an opportunity to clarify. That reframing elevated the discussion beyond personality and into principle. Late-night political segments are often designed for punchlines, but this moment became something else entirely, a study in narrative control. Crockett demonstrated that staying composed under scrutiny can be more powerful than delivering the perfect zinger. She illustrated that intellectual steadiness can neutralize tension more effectively than sarcasm. And in a media landscape that rewards immediacy and intensity, she chose deliberation. The result wasn't viral outrage, it was viral respect. Viewers who expected drama instead encountered discipline. The exchange revealed that sometimes the most surprising move in politics is not escalation but restraint. By resisting the pull of spectacle, Crockett subtly challenged the norms of televised political theater. She didn't fight the framing, she reframed it. She didn't silence criticism, she contextualized it. And in doing so, she reminded audiences that leadership is not always about volume, sometimes it's about clarity. As the clip continued to circulate, the reaction online fractured in predictable yet fascinating ways. Supporters applauded Jasmine Crockett for what they described as rare political maturity, a refusal to be baited, a demonstration of discipline in a media environment that often rewards spectacle over substance. Critics, however, questioned whether the calm tone signaled softness, whether an opportunity to strike harder had been deliberately avoided. But across ideological lines, one point of agreement emerged. The reaction was unexpected. And in politics, unexpected moments are the ones that linger. They cut through rehearsed narratives and reveal something that feels unscripted, even when it may be carefully considered. By the end of her exchange with Stephen Colbert, the conversation was no longer centered on who won the segment. It wasn't about punchlines, applause breaks, or trending hashtags. It became about perception, and more importantly, about who controls it. Crockett signaled without fanfare that she intended to control her own. Yet what unfolded after the camera stopped rolling proved even more consequential than what happened under the studio lights. Once the clip hit social media platforms, it didn't merely circulate, it detonated. Within hours, political commentators were dissecting the exchange frame by frame. Supporters called her approach disciplined. Critics labeled it calculated. Neutral observers simply described themselves as surprised. And surprise in the attention economy is oxygen. Late-night political exchanges typically flare up and vanish within a single news cycle. This one lingered. Viewers replayed the moment Colbert laid out the claim. They replayed Crockett's pause. That pause became almost symbolic, interpreted as restraint by some, strategy by others. Regardless of interpretation, few believed it was accidental. It felt intentional, and intention implies preparation. What made the aftermath even more intriguing was what didn't happen. Crockett did not rush to post clarifications online. There were no immediate threads unpacking the segment, no defensive press releases, no emotional follow-ups. She went quiet. In politics, silence can be deafening. That silence created a vacuum, and vacuums in media ecosystems never remain empty for long. Analysts filled the space. They revisited the original Talarico interview. They shared extended clips rather than isolated snippets. Full transcripts began circulating. Context, often the first casualty of virality, re-entered the conversation. The spotlight subtly shifted away from scandal and toward substance. Something unusual followed. Even some initial critics conceded that the longer version of the Talarico interview sounded different from the viral excerpts that had sparked controversy. Agreement did not suddenly materialize, but nuance did, and nuance is rare currency online. The speed of the controversy slowed. When a political uproar decelerates instead of spiraling, it's usually because something interrupted the outrage cycle. In this case, composure did. Meanwhile, Colbert's segment continued racking up views. Comment sections overflowed. Some accused him of oversimplifying the Talarico interview. Others defended his framing as fair commentary. Yet remarkably few claimed that Crockett had lost control of the moment. In fact, many observers remarked that she appeared more composed than ever before, a notable feat under bright studio lights, in front of a live audience with cameras trained on every micro-expression. She didn't flinch, and that steadiness sparked a larger question among insiders and observers alike. Was this a turning point? Political reputations are not constructed solely through legislative victories or policy white papers. They are shaped in moments, in the seconds when pressure peaks and narratives tilt unfavorably. This was one of those moments, and she didn't crumble. There's a quiet power in refusing to overreact. It disarms critics expecting anger. It unsettles opponents anticipating confrontation. It sparks curiosity among viewers. Why isn't she escalating? Why isn't she striking back harder? What calculation is unfolding beneath the surface? Curiosity extends the lifespan of a story more effectively than outrage ever could. Behind the scenes, sources close to the situation suggested that Crockett understood precisely how media cycles function. React too quickly and you feed the frenzy. Attack too aggressively and you risk becoming the headline for reasons unrelated to substance. By withholding immediate commentary, she effectively placed the burden back on the audience. Examine the facts yourself. That's a gamble. Trusting the public to engage deeply carries risk in an era of skimmed headlines and shortened attention spans. But in this instance, many viewers did dig deeper. Long-form segments of the Talarico interview began trending